Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the mind of one of the greats, Charles T. Munger.
Right. But most people think of Buffett, but Munger,
Mm-hmm.
he was the indispensable partner, the intellectual engine behind Berkshire Hathaway.
Absolutely. And the numbers are just, well, they speak for themselves.
Mhm.
Since 1964, Berkshire's value under their guidance shot up something like 13,500 times.
It's almost unbelievable, an incredible legacy, and that's what we're digging into today.
Exactly. So you provided a whole stack of sources, biography, his principles, his philosophy. Our mission here is to kind of distill that down. What are the core lessons from his life? It's like a blueprint, really, built on rationality, ethics, and just this relentless learning.
And what's interesting is he mostly stayed out of the limelight, didn't he? A deliberate choice.
Yeah, very much so, despite the immense success. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. His roots.
Takes us back to Omaha, Nebraska. Born in 1924, classic Midwestern upbringing, seems like. Lots of emphasis on discipline, strong work ethic.
And there's that story about his early job working for Warren Buffett's grandfather, Ernest, at the grocery store.
Oh yeah, Buffett and Son. Sounds like it was incredibly tough. We're talking 12-hour shifts, no breaks, no meals provided,
Wow, and the pay.
$2 a day. But the real kicker, the thing that stuck with Munger, was this daily ritual.
Which was?
At the end of every shift, he and the other boys had to pay back 2 pennies
2 pennies? Why on earth?
to cover the employer's contribution for the brand new Social Security Act. And apparently, Ernest Buffett gave them a little lecture along with it about, the evils of socialism and government spending.
Huh. So a very early, very direct lesson in economic philosophy, you could say.
Definitely. It seems like that experience really hammered home the value of self-reliance for him.
Okay, so that's the discipline side. But intellectually, he was quite something from early on, too, right? Voracious reader.
Absolutely. Loved history, biography, and developed this real admiration for Benjamin Franklin. The ultimate polymath statesman, inventor, writer.
That fits. Franklin was all about practical wisdom and self-improvement.
And you see Munger's multidisciplinary thinking emerging really early. He was friends with the family doctor, Ed Davis, a urologist.
Right, you mentioned that connection.
Yeah, and Munger didn't just chat with him. He apparently went through Dr. Davis's medical journals. He was fascinated by the statistics, the outcomes of different surgeries.
Seriously, as a kid, that's unusual.
It is. But it shows that early focus on data, on odds, on outcomes, even way outside what you'd expect. That's foundational Munger right there.
And even his hobbies showed some early signs. Something about hamsters.
Yes. The sources mention him raising and trading hamsters. Apparently he was a sharp negotiator even then, always angling to get, the bigger ones or the ones with unusual colors.
So an eye for value and a knack for a deal, even with rodents.
Seems like it. Little glimpse of the future investor.
Then college Michigan, math, but drawn to physics. He really pushed physics, didn't he?
Oh, constantly. He believed everyone aiming for success should study it. Because the concepts, the formulas, they perfectly demonstrate how powerful a sound theory can be for prediction.
Like a model for clear thinking.
Exactly. Physics demands rationality, clear cause and effect. That became his guiding light.
Okay, so the intellectual foundation is there. Then comes the pivot towards, well, making serious money. He goes to Harvard Law, right? Even without an undergrad degree.
That's right. Used the GI Bill, got in, graduated magna cum laude in '48, started practicing law out in Southern California.
But he wasn't satisfied just being a lawyer.
No, not long term.
Yeah.
He looked around and saw that, even senior partners were basically earning based on hours, billed, seniority. It was steady, but incremental.
And he wanted more.
He wanted what his capitalist clients had, like Harvey Mudd, who he apparently really admired. He wanted to deploy capital, not just bill hours.
So he makes the jump into property development with Otis Booth.
Yeah, and they hit it big pretty quickly. Their first venture, building some condos near Caltech, they put in $100,000.
And got back.
$300,000 profit. A huge win right out of the gate.
What was their edge? Just good timing, good location?
Location and quality were key, sure. Speed and efficiency, too. But the real difference, the Munger touch, was his capital strategy.
Which was?
Reinvest everything. He left all the profits in the business. Compounding. So as he put it, bigger and bigger projects became possible.
Smart. Build the snowball.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by 1960, just from real estate, he'd built up a nest egg of about $1 million. That gave him serious independence.
But this period, the early 50s, wasn't just about business success. He faced some really tough personal challenges.
Yeah, really difficult times. The divorce in 1953, and then just devastatingly, his young son, Teddy, was diagnosed with leukemia and passed away.
God, that's awful. He was still quite young himself then.
Late 20s. There's this heartbreaking account from a friend, seeing Munger visiting Teddy in the hospital and then afterwards just walking the streets of Pasadena crying, completely overcome.
It adds such a layer of depth, doesn't it? Knowing that profound grief sits alongside the later image of this hyper-rational titan of finance.
It really does. It grounds the story, adds the human element to the ethical framework he became known for.
Which brings us perfectly, actually, to 1959, Omaha, the meeting.
The legendary meeting.
Yeah.
Set up by the Davis family. Yes, the same Dr. Ed Davis whose journals Charlie read.
Small world.
Isn't it? Dr. Davis had already invested $100,000 with a young Warren Buffett, and he told Buffett, you remind me of Charlie Munger. He saw the similarity in their thinking.
And when they finally met for dinner, sparks flew.
Instantly. Warren's wife, Susie, apparently watched them and said she'd never seen Warren get quieter like that. He actually let Charlie take the lead in the conversation. She called it, like, combustion.
A match made in heaven was her other phrase, right?
That's the one. It just clicked. Intellectually, personally.
And their partnership famously wasn't based on contracts?
Nope. Handshake and trust. Pure alignment. Which is incredible given the stakes later on.
When Buffett was asked, what's Munger's secret sauce, he had that one-word answer.
Rational. Just absolutely fundamentally rational.
So for you, the listener, trying to understand their dynamic, how did Munger's rationality actually change Berkshire's investment approach?
Well, Munger was the one who really pushed Buffett beyond his early cigar butt strategy.
Buying cheap, often struggling companies just because they were statistically undervalued.
Exactly. Munger brought in the idea that it's much, much better to buy a great company at a fair price than a fair company at a great price. Quality matters. Durable competitive advantages.
The moat.
The moat. That shift in focus is what powered their investment partnership, Wheeler, Munger & Co., from 62 to 75.
And the returns were?
Phenomenal, like 19.8% compounded annually. Compare that to the Dow, which is 5.0% over the same period. Yeah. And that includes the nasty 73-74 bear market.
So rationality led to better judgment, focusing on quality, and that rationality was tied to his integrity, too. Buffett said Munger never second-guessed him in 40 years.
Never argued. Buffett called him the perfect partner. And you see that ethical core everywhere. The law firm he co-founded, Munger, Tolles, and Olson, still runs on his principles.
Like, choose clients as you would choose friends.
Precisely. And that other gem, you don't need to take the last dollar.
That really says something. It's not just about maximizing every cent.
Not at all. There's a story about when he left the law firm in 1965 to focus purely on investing. His partner, Fred Warder, had passed away. Munger just left his share of the capital in the firm for Warder's estate.
He didn't have to do that.
No legal obligation. It was purely an ethical decision, a gesture of loyalty and fairness.
Okay, this leads us right into the Munger philosophy. This intellectual framework built on people like Franklin and Cicero.
Big time. He deeply admired Cicero, especially his essay De Senectute on Old Age, which, interestingly, Ben Franklin had actually translated and published in America way back.
What was the core idea from Cicero that resonated so much?
Cicero argued that the real strength in later life isn't physical prowess, like, the warrior Ajax. It's strength of mind, wisdom, like the wise old Nestor from Homer.
How does that apply to, say, investing or business today? Is it just about being smart?
It's more than just raw IQ. It's about emotional control, mental fortitude, resisting the panic and greed that derail most people in the market. It's about having the discipline to stick with your rational analysis, your long-term plan, even when everyone else is losing their heads.
So mental strength over muscle.
Exactly. And Munger loved Cicero's line. The best armor of old age is a well-spent life preceding it, a life employed in the pursuit of useful knowledge and honorable actions and the practice of virtue. That was Munger's playbook.
Constant learning, ethical action. He really lived that, didn't he? Cicero praised Socrates for learning the fiddle late in life, and Munger just kept learning everything.
Relentlessly.
Yeah.
And he tried to pass that on to his kids. He had 8 children, but in his own unique way.
Morality tales.
Yeah. And apparently he had a special fondness for the downward spiral tale.
Sounds ominous.
They were apparently often quite funny, but showed these, horrific chains of consequences from bad decisions. Lessons wrapped in dark humor.
Like the story of the finance guy who owned up to a huge loss immediately.
Right. And kept his job because the CEO valued the honesty, the lack of cover-up, more than the loss itself. Instant confession saved him.
Practical ethics.
And also teaching inversion, which is key, Munger.
Explain inversion again.
It's solving problems backward. Instead of asking, how can I succeed, you ask, what are all ways I could fail? Or how could I be miserable? Then you just avoid doing those things.
Don't be stupid, basically.
That's a big part of it. Avoid the common pitfalls. This ties into his whole mental models approach, doesn't it? Arguably his biggest intellectual contribution.
Yeah, talk about the mental models.
Okay, so this was Munger's way of fighting what he saw as the biggest problem in decision-making. The expert with only one tool, the man with a hammer, seeing every problem as a nail.
Right, single discipline thinking.
Exactly. Munger believed you needed a whole latticework of models from different fields: physics, biology, psychology, economics, history, engineering, concepts like redundancy, compounding, breakpoints, feedback loops, Occam's razor, margin of safety.
So you build this toolkit in your head.
A checklist, really.
Yeah.
And when you face a complex problem, you run it through these different models. It helps you see things others miss, helps you identify your own biases. It's the engine behind his rationality.
And these big ideas translated into everyday habits, too. Little rules.
Totally, like the car borrowing rule. One of his kids mentioned this.
Yeah.
If you borrowed Munger's car,
You had to bring it back full.
always, even if it was only half full when you picked it up, it's small, but it's about consideration, leaving things better than you found them. Builds trust.
And his focus was legendary, right? The Chinese wall.
That's the phrase friends used, his ability to just completely block out distractions. You can be deep in financial reports or some dense biography.
While chaos erupts around him.
Kids yelling, TV blaring, didn't matter. Warren Buffett even told a story about Munger driving, and apparently running through 3 red lights because they were so deep in discussing some complex financial issue.
Whoa. Okay, that's maybe too much focus while driving.
Huh, maybe. But professionally, that ability to filter noise was crucial.
How so? What's the practical takeaway for, say, someone managing their own money or business?
It's about avoiding the noise. The constant media chatter, the market frenzy, the short-term panic or euphoria. That Chinese wall lets you stick to your rational framework, your mental models, instead of getting swept up in emotion or herd behavior. You make decisions based on your analysis, not the headlines.
Makes sense. Tune out the static. But even Munger had his moments of seeming irrationality, right? We have to talk about the boat.
Ah, yes. Munger's folly, his enormous catamaran.
Which Buffett and their friend Rick Guerin apparently loved to tease him about.
Mercilessly. They called it the only completely irrational thing Charlie ever did. Especially because apparently he'd managed to sink a previous smaller boat on a perfectly calm day.
Oh, that's brilliant. So why the giant catamaran then?
Well, Munger had the perfect defense. He just said, the boat was fun to design and build. What's irrational about that?
Touché.
Right. He acknowledged it wasn't an investment in the typical sense. It was about the pleasure of creation, the process, which, even for a hyper-rational mind, clearly had its own value.
We should probably mention Bill Gates' view of him, too. Gates called him.
Truly the broadest thinker I have ever encountered, which is saying something coming from Gates. He talked about their correspondence covering everything from stock options to
The mating habits of naked mole rats.
Yep, that level of eclectic curiosity.
And Munger could certainly turn a phrase, his description of venture capitalists defending excessive stock options.
Classic Munger zinger. He called them no better than the piano player in a whorehouse.
Oof. Vivid. Gets the point across instantly.
Doesn't it just? So, to sort of wrap up the core lessons for you, the listener, Munger's incredible success wasn't luck. It was a process.
Rooted in that multidisciplinary rationality.
The mental models checklist, exactly. Combined with just unwavering ethics in big things and small things.
And that relentless pursuit of useful knowledge, like Cicero advised.
A life built on those pillars. The financial success was almost a byproduct of living that kind of life.
That's the blueprint. Okay, let's leave our listeners with one final thought. It connects back to Munger's hero, Ben Franklin.
Right. Munger really admired how Franklin didn't just get rich and, retire comfortably. He used his wealth to gain independence.
Financial independence so he could focus on what?
On improving society. Helping build things, libraries, universities, civic institutions, things that would outlast him, things for future generations.
So the provocative thought is this. Maybe, following Munger and Franklin, The most successful ventures aren't just the ones that deliver the biggest immediate profit.
But the ones that contribute to a better, more rational, more ethical future. A legacy that goes way beyond the next quarterly report. Something grounded in that kind of enduring wisdom.
Definitely something to think about. Until our next deep dive, thanks for joining us.
See you next time. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are really immersing ourselves in the foundational philosophy of Charlie Munger.
Yeah.
His success, it seems, isn't just about investing genius, right? It's credited to this really rigorous self-taught blueprint for decision-making, for learning. It applies to almost everything.
Exactly. We're deep diving into the specific source material around Munger's approach, which, he modeled after his big hero, Ben Franklin.
Right.
And this isn't really a how-to guide for picking stocks. It's more of a framework for, well, achieving what he called spectacular success by making fewer but much better choices.
And Warren Buffett's assessment, that famous quote, it really says it all about how effective Munger is.
Oh, absolutely. Charlie can analyze and evaluate any kind of deal faster and more accurately than any man alive. He sees any valid weakness in 60 seconds. That's quite the endorsement.
It really is. And that speed, that accuracy, it seems to stem directly from his mental architecture. So our mission today is really to unpack that original kind of multi-layered approach, what he calls his constant search for better methods of thought. But I want to focus on the basic thought processes, the guiding principles he uses to make sense of a pretty chaotic world.
And the place to start really is with his central critique. It kind of defines his whole method.
Yeah.
The danger of extreme specialization.
Ah, the famous analogy. To the man with a hammer, the world looks like a nail.
Exactly. He saw that if you're trained only in one discipline, maybe conventional economics, for instance, you'll try to smash every complex problem with just that one tool.
Which, yeah, doesn't sound very effective.
Well, in his, let's say, blunt phrasing, it's a dumb way of handling problems.
Yeah.
So his solution is actually pretty revolutionary, the multiple mental models approach.
Yeah.
Munger insists that real success demands, basically the big ideas and the big disciplines, and use them. Routinely, all of them.
Wow. Okay, that sounds exhausting. Collecting, maybe 100 models from fields as diverse as history, psychology, math, engineering, biology, physics, chemistry, statistics. How do you actually turn that massive collection of knowledge into, like, a usable tool?
He describes it as building a latticework. It's a great visual, I think.
Yeah.
You borrow tools and formulas from these different fields, and you kind of stitch them together.
Okay.
The goal isn't necessarily to become an expert in, say, quantum mechanics. It's more about internalizing the core mechanisms, the patterns that govern those fields, and using that understanding to reduce the chaos of a complex problem down to its fundamentals.
Can you give us a specific example? Like, why would he need a physics model alongside, say, a psychology model for an investment decision?
Sure. So physics gives you the model of critical mass, right, which is essential for understanding nonlinear change, things suddenly tipping over.
Oh.
Engineering gives you the principle of redundancy, backup systems, the idea that even the best systems can fail, so you need a margin of safety built in.
Right. Makes sense.
And then psychology gives you all those cognitive misjudgment models, the biases, the shortcuts our brains take that cause us and everyone else to make predictable mistakes over and over again.
So if you only used, say, economics, you might totally miss the need for redundancy for safety, or you might ignore the psychological pressures making a market behave irrationally.
Precisely. You have to apply them all because, well, like the naturalist John Muir observed, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. You need that multidisciplinary view to really see the whole ecosystem of a problem.
That interconnectedness.
Yeah.
It feels like that's the real key here. So once you've built this pretty formidable mental toolkit, this lattice work, what's the ultimate goal? What are you trying to achieve with it?
You're trying to see the connections. Julian Huxley put it perfectly, if a bit bluntly. Life is just one damn relatedness after another. You have to have the models, yeah, but then you must train your mind to see the relatedness. And crucially, the second-order effects, the ripple effects that come from that relatedness. That's the difference between just surface analysis and, deep understanding.
And when those powerful forces line up, reinforcing each other, amplifying each other, that's when Munger talks about something really spectacular happening. What exactly is the Lollapalooza effect? Why is it so much more than just simple addition.
Right, the Lollapalooza effect. It's Munger's own term, actually. It describes phenomena where several factors, maybe two, three, or four big forces, are all operating in the same direction. And the result is, well, it's nonlinear.
So not 1 + 1 + 1 = 3.
Exactly. It's more like 10 or 100 sometimes. It's a massive amplification.
Like reaching critical mass in physics, where the reaction suddenly becomes explosive.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah. You often see very little happening, maybe nothing much at all, until you hit that critical mass point. And then you get this nuclear explosion of results. Could be overwhelmingly positive or, devastatingly negative. That compounding reinforcement is what generates those huge asymmetrical outcomes you sometimes see in markets and, frankly, in life.
It sounds like the ideal scenario defined, but I imagine it's not the norm. The sources do make it clear that often those 100 mental models are actually pulling in different directions, presenting conflicting forces.
Oh, that's absolutely the reality. Far more often, you're forced to confront what Munger calls huge, miserable trade-offs.
Right.
And recognizing these conflicts, understanding that improving one thing, like efficiency, might actually hurt something else, like safety, that's absolutely crucial. Munger basically suggests that if you can't think in terms of these trade-offs, you're kind of unfit for serious decision-making.
Wow. That rigor is intense. Okay, so we've established the map, this sort of philosophical lattice work. But just having the map doesn't mean you avoid falling into pitfalls, right?
Right.
What's Munger's first rule for actually navigating the terrain, for executing a decision? He often starts not with what to do, but what not to do.
That's right. He calls it inversion. It's a really powerful idea.
Yeah.
He gains this enormous advantage just by first eliminating the unpromising parts of the chessboard, so to speak.
It's the philosophy behind his famous quip, isn't it? All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there.
Exactly. It sounds morbid, but it's about avoiding catastrophe.
That focus on survival, on risk avoidance, it feels surprisingly primal. It's reflected in that humorous but pretty pointed advice he gives for success in life. Don't do cocaine, don't race trains, and avoid aid situations.
It sounds overly simplistic, maybe, but that method, systematically listing and avoiding the potential ways to screw up badly, that's fundamentally how he approaches every investment decision. But part of avoiding missteps means knowing exactly where your own map ends, which brings us neatly to the circle of competence.
Ah, yes, this reminds me of that story, maybe apocryphal, about Max Planck and his chauffeur.
Right. The chauffeur supposedly memorized Planck's standard lecture perfectly.
Yeah, delivered it flawlessly, apparently. Until someone, a real physicist in the audience, asked a genuinely tough, spontaneous question. And the chauffeur just had to say, my boss will answer that.
It's such a great illustration of an essential lesson in self-awareness. In the real world, you have to know, really honestly know, when you are Max Planck, when you have genuine, deep mastery, and when you're just the chauffeur reciting things you've heard.
So if you can't handle the next tough question from someone who really knows the field,
Then you're outside your circle. You
Yeah.
absolutely have to stay inside that boundary where you have true understanding.
and that self-awareness directly feeds into his investment selection process, right?
Yeah.
He uses that basic screen, the 3 baskets filter, to limit where he even looks.
Exactly. His potential candidates, they have to be simple and understandable to him. The baskets are just yes, no, and too tough to understand. And he's not ashamed at all to just instantly screen out entire industries.
Why put whole fields, like, say, pharmaceuticals or maybe high tech, into too tough to understand? Especially given how successful those fields can be, isn't he risking missing huge opportunities?
Well, he'd argue he's hunting for big, obvious nuggets lying in plain sight, not trying to sift through mountains of sand for tiny specks. Those fields are often just too complex for him because they rely on rapid, unpredictable change or maybe scientific breakthroughs that are way outside his core competence.
Okay.
If he can't confidently model the long-term competitive advantage, boom, it goes straight into the too tough basket. And anything that's heavily promoted, like most IPOs, that's almost always an immediate no.
Got it. So once an opportunity actually passes that initial screen, the approach seems to be defined by this, well, seems like a contradiction almost. Extreme patience combined with extreme decisiveness, the whole sit-on-your-ass investing method.
It really is the core of his value proposition. He genuinely believes a successful career, certainly in investing, boils down to only a handful of really big decisions. You might look at 1,000 different propositions, but you should probably be amused or uninterested in 998 of them and only really act decisively on 2.
That sounds great in theory, waiting for the fat pitch. But in today's world, everything moves so fast.
Right.
Isn't that level of patience? Well, isn't it a luxury most investors or business people just can't afford?
Munger would strongly argue that patience isn't a luxury. It's an absolute necessity for superior returns. He uses that fantastic analogy of Ted Williams, the baseball player.
Right, the strike zone divided into cells.
Exactly, 77 cells. And Williams apparently knew he'd only swing at pitches in his absolute best cells. He'd happily take a walk or even a strike if the pitch wasn't perfect for him. Munger sees investing the same way. Wait for that fat pitch that is slow, straight, and right in the middle of your sweet spot. And then you swing hard.
That mentality really is captured perfectly by that 20-slot ticket idea too, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Buffett's concept.
The idea that if you were only allowed 20 investments in your entire lifetime, you'd be forced to think incredibly carefully. And you'd load up, bet big, only when the odds were truly, overwhelmingly in your favor.
It shifts the whole focus away from frequency of trading and towards, accurately calculating value. Munger teaches that a great business at a fair price is vastly superior to a fair business at a great price. You have to try and estimate the total cash the business will generate from now until, well, basically forever, and then discount it back to what it's worth today.
Speaking of value over price,
Yeah.
those big historical acquisitions the U.S. made, like the Louisiana Purchase way back in 1803 or buying Alaska in 1867, they seem to perfectly embody this principle, right?
Yeah.
They paid relatively little cash at the time for assets whose true long-term value in resources and strategic position turned out to be just astronomical.
Absolutely. Textbook examples, they bought immense value, not just a cheap price tag. And crucially, when Munger talks about a great business, he's almost always talking about its competitive advantage, what he and Buffett famously call the moat.
Right.
They strive to identify businesses that already have a strong moat, and then they actively look for ways to make that moat even wider every single year.
The moat being the defense mechanism against competitive destruction, which, let's face it, is the single biggest threat to most companies over the long haul.
And that leads us right to the final, really necessary piece of this whole puzzle, the checklist. Because having all the models waiting patiently for the right pitch, it doesn't mean much if you don't apply real analytic rigor at the end. Munger strongly advocates using a checklist, much like a careful pilot would, to make sure all the complex factors, internal risks, external opportunities are properly considered before you actually pull the trigger.
Why is intellectual humility the very first step on that checklist, even for someone as demonstrably brilliant as Munger?
Because if you're making a big decision, especially with large amounts of capital, probably the single biggest danger is your own ego. Intellectual humility means staying rigidly within that well-defined circle of competence we talked about. And, maybe most importantly, never fooling yourself. As he often warns, you are the easiest person to fool. The checklist forces you to be brutally honest about what you actually know and, just as importantly, what you don't know.
And the second on that list is independence. That seems critical in pretty much any field where herd behavior is common finance, sure, but also social trends, even politics.
Definitely. True objectivity requires independence of thought. If you just mimic the herd, you invite what statisticians call regression to the mean. You'll just achieve average performance, maybe worse. You have to trust the correctness of your analysis, your judgment, regardless of whether others agree or disagree right now. The crowd is very often wrong, especially at extremes.
And finally, Munger really stresses honesty and integrity. This isn't just presented as a moral imperative, is it? He seems to see it as a powerful financial and business advantage, too.
Oh, absolutely. He believes it pays big dividends in the long run. Munger and Buffett famously maintain this huge area between what is technically legal and what they're actually willing to do.
Right.
They believe that building and maintaining a rock-solid reputation for honesty builds trust. And that trust, in turn, leads to better partnerships, better deals, opportunities that just aren't available to competitors who might cut corners.
Yeah.
Ben Franklin proved it right. Honesty was the best policy, both morally and financially.
So even after all this incredibly exhaustive analysis, the models, the patience, the checklist, there's still this final, almost philosophical stage before pulling the trigger. The analysis kind of generates what he calls a feel. It sounds less mathematical, more like the synthesis of a lifetime spent studying patterns.
That really is the end goal, I think. Ultimately, Munger's superior performance seems to stem from that fundamental combination: preparation, discipline, patience, and decisiveness. When you apply those consistently, day in, day out, they combine to create that Lollapalooza effect in his own life and results. And the core rule he absolutely never breaks is just keep learning, never stop.
And, as we've discussed, why Munger buys focusing on great companies that are easy to understand. His approach to selling is also kind of elegant in its simplicity, isn't it?
It really is. If you buy something simply because it's undervalued, then you're automatically forced to make another complicated decision down the road. When do you sell it once it hits your estimate of intrinsic value?
Boy, that's tricky.
But Munger and Buffett are really focused on putting out large amounts of money in places where they hope they won't have to make another decision for a very, very long time. If you can manage to buy a few truly great companies, then, as Munger famously says, you can sit on your ass and that's a good thing. Less activity often means better results.
Which leaves us with a really provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. Munger's entire strategy seems to revolve around making these decisive long-term actions that actually eliminate the need for future complications, future decisions. So the question is, what decision could you make now in your own field, whether that's personal, professional, financial, that might eliminate the need for 100 future, potentially complicated decisions down the line?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are immersing ourselves in the mind and, well, the Mungerisms of the late, great Charlie Munger.
That's right. And our goal here, it goes beyond just investment tactics. We're pulling from decades of notes, unscripted stuff from Berkshire Hathaway and Wesco financial meetings.
Right, trying to absorb his broader lesson.
Exactly. On rational thinking, integrity, and just the human condition, really.
Munger had such a unique public persona, didn't he?
Yeah.
Very different from Buffett's sort of folksy charm.
Oh, completely. Munger was often seen as this crusty, more private genius, the guy who'd just say what everyone else was thinking, but maybe too scared to voice.
He didn't pull punches.
Not at all. And that dynamic on stage at the annual meetings was legendary.
You mean where Buffett gives this long, detailed answer?
Yeah, like a 10-minute explanation, then turns to Munger.
And Munger just says,
I have nothing to add. Those 5 words.
I love the story about Buffett having a cardboard cutout ready with a recording of that line.
It's great. But it's crucial we see Munger as Buffett's intellectual equal. Because when he did speak...
It was usually something piercingly insightful.
Absolutely. He'd connect psychology, history, economics, all into one simple, actionable idea. He was definitely the teacher you leaned in to hear.
Okay, so let's get into his core philosophy. You're calling it the tortoise method.
We are, and it starts with something surprisingly, well, humble.
All right, let's unpack this. The idea that success isn't about being some kind of super genius, but more about just not being dumb.
Precisely that. Munger's view was that success often comes less from brilliance or originality and more from just avoiding the standard common mistakes. He aimed to be consistently not stupid.
Not trying to be very intelligent.
Right, avoid the calamity.
But isn't there a risk there? In today's market, things move so fast. If you're just trying to avoid stupidity, are you maybe waiting too long, missing the boat?
That's the natural tension, isn't it?
Yeah.
Munger would argue the hares, the ones chasing originality or following the crowd, are more likely to blow up.
While the tortoise plods along.
The tortoise assimilates proven insights, applies them patiently, and often wins. His strategy assumes truly great opportunities. Those fat pitches are rare anyway.
So avoiding the big errors is the day-to-day job.
It is, and he tied minimizing those errors directly to integrity.
Ah, yes, the idea that there's this huge space between what you should do ethically and what you can technically get away with legally.
A huge space, and you should say far, far away from that legal line. He was absolutely firm on this.
And he argued this wasn't just morality, it was good business. That doing the right thing helps you make extra money.
Yes, and it sounds cynical, maybe, but his logic was sound. High integrity builds trust.
And trust is like a competitive advantage.
A powerful one. It lowers transaction costs, reduces the need for oversight, makes management easier, it's practical. He loved Louis Vincent's rule. Tell the truth, and you won't have to remember your lies.
It simplifies things.
Operationally, yes. And this ties into his emphasis on continuous learning. You can't maintain that integrity, that focus, without constantly working at it.
You need that passionate interest in why things are happening.
You do. He said that cast of mind is what sharpens your focus on reality. Without that curiosity, even a high IQ won't save you because you're not updating your mental map.
Okay, so you have this philosophy. Patience, integrity, curiosity. How does that actually translate into running a massive company like Berkshire Hathaway day to day?
Well, that brings us to the Berkshire playbook. Their core strategy, which Munger described as elegantly simple, is built around insurance float.
Right, the cash from premiums they hold before paying claims.
Exactly. He boiled it down, generate that float at a low cost, maybe around 3%.
And then invested in businesses earning, say, 13% pre-tax.
Something like that. That difference is why he called it a hell of a business.
Makes sense. But even with that great model, he was remarkably blunt about the future.
Brutally honest. No room for wishful thinking there. Munger flat out guaranteed Berkshire's future percentage growth would be much lower.
And he gave specific reasons, which is rare for a CEO.
Very rare. First, just sheer size. Berkshire is enormous now. Their investment options are limited to bigger, more competitive arenas. Finding those small, hidden gems, much harder.
And the second reason?
The overall market environment. He felt the prospects in common stocks for the next 15, 20 years were just way less attractive than in the past.
It's pretty bold to basically promise your shareholders the future will be a lot worse than the past in percentage terms.
But he'd add, and we'll tell you the truth about it, that really speaks to their culture.
Conservative, old-fashioned.
Very much so. They prioritize being disaster resistant. No outside consultants telling them what to do, no unnecessary risk-taking. Munger was always aware that for many shareholders, Berkshire stock is basically everything they own.
That's a heavy sense of responsibility.
Deep fiduciary duty. It shapes everything, including how they approach acquisitions. Munger noted most acquisitions fail, like 2/3 of them.
So why do Berkshires often work?
Patience. They wait for no-brainers. They scrounge around, as he put it, and they focus intensely on management quality.
Looking for that peculiar passion in the founders.
Yes. Arguing that passion often beats raw brain power. And once they buy, the management style is, well, almost hands-off.
Radical decentralization.
Total autonomy. They don't burden managers with bureaucracy or endless shareholder relations stuff that managers usually hate. Let them run their business.
Keeps good people happy and focused.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of corporate talk, Munger famously disliked one particular buzzword.
Synergy. He avoided the word itself.
Why? Because the claimed benefits rarely show up.
Pretty much. He felt people promise way more synergy than ever materializes. Berkshire has synergies, sure, but they refuse to make lofty claims about them. It felt dishonest to him.
That honesty again. It leads us to investment discipline and, importantly, learning from mistakes. Munger was a huge proponent of focus investing.
Huge. For him, that meant maybe 10 holdings, not hundreds.
He called excessive diversification madness, right? Knowing most people disagree.
He knew 98% of the investment world thought he was wrong, but his view was the game is about recognizing those truly great ideas that only come along, as he said, very often, meaning very rarely.
You have to wait for the fat pitch.
You do.
But waiting like that with maybe only 10 stocks, isn't that incredibly risky for most people, concentrating all your bets?
He'd say if you've done your homework properly on those 10 bets, the risk is lower than you think. He contrasted that with constantly trading in and out of merely okay undervalued stocks.
Which requires constant monitoring and selling decisions.
Right, versus what he called sit-on-your-ass investing.
Chuckles, I like that term.
Find a few truly great companies, businesses that will compound value over time almost regardless of the noise.
And then just sit tight.
Sit on your ass. Don't make another decision for years, maybe a decade. That inactivity was their preferred state.
Okay, but they did make mistakes. And interestingly, the biggest ones weren't bad buys, but things they didn't buy.
Mistakes of omission. Those were the ones that cost billions and, crucially, don't show up on any financial statement.
Like the famous See's candy example.
That was an early formative one. They almost walked away over a tiny amount, like $100,000 more. Munger admitted they were just being dumb.
Boy, dumb.
Because they were underestimating quality. They learned they needed to pay up for truly superior businesses. That lesson, taking that criticism constructively, was huge. Munger basically said Berkshire was built on learning that.
And they kept making omission mistakes, like missing Walmart.
They did. Failing to buy Walmart just because the stock ticked up a bit before they acted cost them billions. He called themselves slow learners for repeating that kind of error. That's the kind of honest self-assessment you rarely hear.
That practical, reality-based thinking made him pretty critical of academic finance, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Section 4 is really Munger calling out the folly. He just tore down concepts like beta, modern portfolio theory, calculating a precise cost of capital.
He called them bonkers theories.
Bonkers theories and amazing mental malfunction.
Whoa. Okay, let's pause there. Beta, MPT. These are foundational and finance courses. What was his beef exactly?
His beef was with complexity obscuring common sense. Beta measures past stock volatility against the market. He thought that was a crazy way to think about future business risk. MPT pushes diversification into hundreds of things, often without deep understanding.
Just mathematical diversification.
Right. Munger found using these abstract metrics instead of judging the actual business and its management was, well, insane.
So if you throw out theoretical cost of capital, what do you use?
A simple opportunity cost. What else could you do with the money right now? That's your hurdle. If some theorist says your model demands a 100% return, so you shouldn't invest in something great that offers 80%, Munger just called that crazy.
Focus on the real alternatives.
Always. And he had equally strong words for accounting tricks. That famous phrase about EBITDA.
Ah, yes. Every time you see EBITDA.
Substitute the words bullshit earnings.
Laughs.
It really said that.
He did. He felt it was often used to hide the real costs of running a business, especially capital expenditures.
Aggressive, but clear. His warnings about derivatives, though, seemed even more urgent, almost fearful.
He was genuinely alarmed by them. He called the whole system insanely irresponsible, complicated, opaque, terrible incentives.
He had that analogy about companies using them?
Right. They start hedging risk,
Yeah.
which is maybe okay. But then the hedges make reported profits lumpy. So they use new derivatives to smooth out the lumpiness caused by the first ones.
And at that point,
Munger said, you've morphed into lying.
he compared it to Alice in Wonderland world.
The Mad Hatter's Tea Party.
Mm.
Full of wishful thinking, detached from reality. It was openly more pessimistic than Warren on this and basically predicted a major blow-up within 5 to 10 years. So the system was demented. Wow. Okay, shifting from global finance to something more personal. Psychology. His views on envy were quite striking.
Very. He called envy a really stupid sin.
Stupid. Why?
Because it's the only one where you get absolutely no fun, just pain. It's pure self-inflicted misery, worrying that someone else is getting richer faster.
He mentioned George Soros getting caught in the tech bubble.
Yeah, apparently Soros jumped in late because he couldn't stand being left out while others were making fortunes. Then he got burned. Munger's point. Don't let envy drive your decisions.
Conquer that internal feeling. That feeds into his broader advice on life and learning, which seems anchored in one main activity.
Reading. Absolutely central.
The book with a couple of legs sticking out?
That was him. He was adamant. I have known no wise people who didn't read all the time. None. Zero.
And why read so broadly?
Because you need the big ideas in the big disciplines. Histories, psychology, physics, math. You need multiple mental models. Otherwise, you're the man with the hammer seeing males everywhere.
Avoid that single discipline tunnel vision.
Exactly. Build a latticework of models. And he had a neat trick for making them stick.
Connect them to the people.
Yeah, tie the big ideas to the lives and personalities of the thinkers who developed them. Make Adam Smith your friend. Makes it less abstract, more memorable.
So putting it all together, what was his final advice for someone young and ambitious, wanting to get rich? I bet it wasn't flashy.
Definitely not. It was incredibly simple, almost anticlimactic. Spend each day trying to be a little wiser than you were when you woke up.
Just incremental improvement.
Discharge your duties faithfully.
Yeah.
And just slug it out 1 inch at a time, day by day. Build discipline patiently. That prepares you for the occasional fast spurt when opportunity finally knocks.
It all circles back to reality, to honesty.
That's the bedrock ethos. Not fooling yourself. He said it's one of the most powerful tools you can have, mainly because it's so rare.
Looking back, Munger's greatest gift wasn't maybe a specific formula, but that synthesis, right? Connecting psychology to investing, culture to economics.
Absolutely. That ability to draw from everywhere. Success for him wasn't about complexity. It was about patient discipline, relentless curiosity, and brutal honesty about reality.
Which stuff? It's an unconventional path when, the whole world seems to reward hyperactivity and jargon.
It is, and that's the challenge for you listening right now. How do you apply the simple common sense approach when Wall Street, academia, maybe even your own instincts are pushing you towards complexity?
So here's the final thought. If Munger looked at an 80% return opportunity and called it crazy to pass up just because some abstract model demanded 100%, what financial belief are you holding on to that might actually be an amazing mental malfunction?
What theory are you following that blinds you to a simple, better opportunity right in front of you, measuring everything against your real, concrete alternatives? Maybe that's the only benchmark that truly matters, something to chew on. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're strapping in for quite a ride. We're going through some, incredibly concentrated wisdom on making decisions, investing, and just practical life success.
Yeah, and our sources, they aren't your typical academic papers. We're looking at talks, lectures, commencement speeches, things like that.
Right, a collection that really lays out a kind of foundational framework for, let's call it, worldly wisdom.
And our mission here, it's a bit different. We're not handing you a checklist for, guaranteed success.
No, it's more like an anti-guide, isn't it?
Exactly. A map of how to fail, how to think irrationally. The goal is to get to good judgment by building this mental latticework of models, as the sources keep calling it.
That lattice work.
Yeah.
That's where we want to end up. But the starting point, the absolute foundation for good judgment, according to these talks, is the strategy called inversion.
It's hammered home constantly.
Stop thinking about how to win, start thinking about what guarantees you lose, and then just don't do that.
Precisely. The mantra is invert. Always invert. If you have a really tough problem, try attacking it backward.
Like that rustic fellow they mention.
Yeah, the one who just wanted to know where he was going to die.
So he'd never go there.
Exactly, that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
It's simple, but powerful.
It really is beautifully simple, and it sets us up perfectly for this anti-guide. Our sources bring up Johnny Carson's commencement speech.
Ah, yes, his prescriptions for guaranteed misery. Tried and tested, apparently.
So solid. Definitely worth revisiting. What were they again?
Well, Carson had 3 main paths that he said, from his experience, always led straight to misery. First one, maybe the most common trap.
Let me guess. Chemicals.
You got it. Ingesting chemicals to try and alter your mood or perception.
And the warning there isn't just about, the immediate risk. It's the psychology behind it, how addiction creeps up on you. That's the really insidious part.
It really is. It's like quicksand, right? The sources put it so well. The bonds of degradation, these habits that just ruin your life, they're too light to even feel.
Until they're suddenly too strong to break.
Exactly. It's a path that just never ever makes anyone's life better. Only worse. Simple avoidance is the only winning strategy there.
Okay, so rule 1 for misery. Addictive chemicals. Avoid. What were the other 2?
The second, Carson pointed out, was envy.
Ah, envy. The green-eyed monster.
Yep. He said it joins chemicals in winning the quantity prize for causing human misery. It's been wrecking lives forever, long before any commandments were written down.
2 enough. And the third?
Resentment. If you really want to be miserable, just deeply resent everything that happens to you. It's like this bitter rind, they call it, that just makes everything harder to swallow.
That's a powerful image. So chemicals, envy, resentment, Carson's trifecta of misery.
Yeah.
But the speaker we're drawing from added a 4th one, didn't he?
He did. And this one is absolutely central to our whole deep dive today.
Which is?
Maximizing what you learn only from your own personal experience.
And minimizing what you learn vicariously from others, from history, from books, from mentors.
Exactly. If you fail to learn vicariously, you're basically signing up for what's called unoriginal error.
Unoriginal error. I like that phrase. Meaning you're just making the same dumb mistakes countless others have already made.
And documented. Think about it. Predictable business failures, getting sucked into destructive cults, driving recklessly over and over. It's all there.
It's like history sends us these memos and we just don't read them.
It's called the stupidest way to run a life, and frankly, it's hard to argue with that.
So it really sounds like this worldly wisdom isn't about some secret flash of brilliance. It's more about systematically sidestepping the known pitfalls.
That's a huge part of it, absolutely. But to avoid those pitfalls effectively, you need the right tools. And that brings us back to the latticework idea.
The mental models.
Right, you need multiple mental models drawn from different disciplines. Because if you only rely on 1 or 2, well, human nature takes over.
You become the man with a hammer?
Exactly. To the man with only a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail.
Huh. I know that feeling. Trying to solve every life problem with my one favorite spreadsheet function.
We all do it. The tendency is to, and I quote, torture reality so that it fits the models you already know and love.
Yeah.
Your brain craves that consistency, even if reality is screaming something different.
So how do we fight that? Where do these reliable models come from?
Well, according to the sources, the most reliable ones, the bedrock, comes from hard science and engineering.
Things like critical mass from physics, or basic probability like from Fermat and Pascal.
Precisely. Or even just fundamental engineering ideas like having backup systems, redundancy. These aren't just for labs or building bridges.
They apply everywhere, in business, in life.
Absolutely. These principles govern reality, period. But right after the hard sciences, the next crucial set of models comes from psychology.
Understanding how our own minds work, or fail to work.
Yes. Our perception, our cognition, it uses shortcuts. It has to. The brain can't have infinite circuitry for every possible input.
Like a magician exploiting those built-in shortcuts in our perception.
That's a great analogy. And knowing these tendencies, this psychology of misjudgment, is absolutely essential for worldly wisdom. You have to understand how easily you and everyone else can be fooled.
But it's not just about defense, right? Understanding psychology can also be used constructively, like in management.
Oh, definitely. The sources bring up Carl Braun, the engineering company founder. He had this incredible rule about communication.
The 5 W's rule.
That's the one. Who, what, where, when, and, critically, why. If you told someone to do something, even something simple, and you left out the why.
You could get fired. That sounds intense, almost excessively rigid. Wouldn't people just start padding memos with fluff?
It sounds harsh, maybe, but think about the psychology. Braun understood something crucial. The moment you tell someone why they need to do something.
It clicks differently in their head.
Exactly. They instantly grasp the context. They see the instruction as more important. They understand the cause and effect.
So they're more likely to actually do it, and do it correctly. Less careless error.
Precisely. It wasn't about rigidity for its own sake. It was a mechanism for ensuring understanding and careful execution. Brilliant, really.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's take these models from hard science, geometry, psychology, and apply them. How does this work in really competitive fields, like, say, investing?
Great application. The sources use the model of the pari-mutuel system, like at the racetrack.
Right, where the odds aren't set by a bookie, but by the bets the public makes.
Exactly. And that's key because it's like a market. It's efficient in the sense that prices adjust instantly based on betting.
But it's not perfectly efficient, because the crowd, the public setting those odds, is often wrong, sometimes wildly wrong.
Precisely. And the big insight for investors, drawn from this, is surprisingly simple. Maybe too simple, which is why people ignore it.
What is it?
Successful investors, like the really successful horse bettors, they practice extreme patience. They bet very seldom.
They're not trying to predict every race or every stock movement.
Not at all. They're waiting. Waiting for what the sources call a near cinch. A moment where the odds are overwhelmingly in their favor, where there's a huge mispricing or a massive structural advantage they understand.
And when that moment comes,
they load up. They bet big. It requires incredible discipline and focus, not trying to know everything, but waiting for the thing you do know with high confidence.
Okay, so discipline is key. Wait for that near cinch. But once you're focused, where do you look for those actual advantages, particularly in business? What models apply?
Well, scale often creates powerful advantages. Think about the experience curve.
Doing something complex over and over makes you better and cheaper at it.
Right. The more volume you handle for a complex task, the more efficient you become. Your costs drop relative to smaller competitors. That alone can create a huge, almost insurmountable advantage over time.
And there are mathematical advantages too, right? Like pure geometry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about building, say, large circular storage tanks. The volume, the capacity, increases with the cube of the radius, while the surface area, the amount of steel you need, only increases with the square.
So bigger tanks mean drastically less steel per gallon stored. Pure math creating a cost advantage.
Pure math. And then there's advertising scale. This was huge.
Like when network TV came along.
Exactly. Suddenly, big branded companies think Procter & Gamble got this enormous structural edge. Why? Because the cost of running national TV ads was astronomical.
Meaning smaller competitors just couldn't afford to play. It built this massive economic moat around the big players.
An almost impenetrable moat purely from the economics of advertising scale at that time.
But okay, even if a business has these great structural advantages, scale, whatever, if the person running it doesn't understand their own limits, they can still drive it into the ground.
Oh, absolutely. Which brings us right back to psychology and a crucial countermodel. The circle of competence.
Knowing what you know, and maybe more importantly, knowing what you don't know.
You have to be relentless about figuring out your own aptitudes. What are you actually good at? Where do you have an edge? Because if you insist on playing games where other people have a natural aptitude and you don't,
you're going to lose. Guaranteed.
Guaranteed. So for most people, the realistic goal isn't, being the next global hedge fund superstar. It's more like becoming a really good plumbing contractor in Bemidji. Meaning someone who, through years, decades maybe, of steady work, learning, and focusing, develops deep, specialized, trusted competence within a specific area. You build your circle slowly and carefully.
That makes sense. Build real competence where you have aptitude. But even then, our own minds can sabotage us, right? Let's talk about those cognitive biases again. Which ones are most dangerous in business and investing?
Two really stand out in the source material. The first is the inconsistency avoidance tendency.
The brain's desire to just stick with its first conclusion.
Pretty much. The
Yeah.
sources use this vivid analogy. The human mind acts like a human egg after fertilization. Once the first sperm gets in, it shuts down. No others allowed.
Wow. So once an idea or conclusion gets lodged in our brain,
There's this automatic tendency to shut out conflicting information, contradictory evidence. It makes people carry wrong thinking, bad ideas, bad strategies right to their graves.
because changing your mind, especially about something you arrived at yourself, is just mentally uncomfortable, painful even.
Extremely painful. So we unconsciously avoid it. You see it all the time, sticking with a failing product, a bad hire, a flawed strategy, just because admitting the initial call was wrong feels too difficult.
Chilling when you think about how automatic it is. Okay, what's the second major bias?
Instead of caused bias. This one is everywhere, especially where money is involved.
And we usually think of this as conscious corruption, like deliberate cheating or greed. But the sources frame it differently, don't they?
They do. They emphasize it often operates as a subconscious drift.
Mm.
People aren't necessarily setting out to be immoral, but incentives powerfully, subtly influence their thinking and judgment, and then the rationalization kicks in.
The mind is a great rationalizer.
Spectacularly good at it. The example given is, frankly, startling. It's about a surgeon who became known for removing huge numbers of perfectly normal gallbladders.
Normal ones. Why?
He had somehow convinced himself, genuinely it seems, that the gallbladder was the root of almost all medical evil. But the underlying driver, almost certainly the financial incentive for performing the surgeries, it's subconsciously skewed his judgment and his brain rationalized it.
That's terrifying. So the big takeaway there is
You absolutely must distrust advice when it's particularly good for the advisor. The potential for subconscious bias is just too high. Assume it's present until proven otherwise.
wow, okay. Check your ego, check the incentives. It all seems to point towards needing to constantly learn and reassess.
Which leads perfectly into the whole ethos of continuous learning that permeates these talks. Wisdom isn't a destination, it's a process. You have to be a learning machine.
And a key part of that learning process is brutal self-honesty.
Intense self-criticism and objectivity. The greats really exemplify this. Think of Darwin. What made him so effective?
He paid extra attention to anything that contradicted his theories.
Exactly. He deliberately gave priority attention to any evidence, any fact that seemed to disconfirm his most cherished, hard-won ideas. He knew that was where the real learning, the real testing happened.
Einstein said something similar, didn't he? About destroying his own ideas being key.
He did. Cited self-criticism as vital. It's
Yep.
about fighting that inconsistency avoidance tendency head-on.
So what happens if we don't cultivate that objectivity? What if someone, especially when they're young, embraces a really intense ideology instead?
That's dangerous. According to the sources, getting locked into a heavy ideology early on, especially if you express it very strongly, very violently, it can fundamentally damage your general thinking ability.
It locks the brain into a specific pattern.
An unfortunate pattern, yes. It ruins general cognition because everything gets filtered through that rigid ideological lens.
Yeah.
You lose the ability to weigh evidence objectively.
And in today's world, with polarization being so high,
It's easier than ever to fall into that trap. Whether the ideology leans left or right, it feels certain, but it cripples your ability to think clearly. The safer path, the wiser path, is always to retain objectivity, to allow for doubt, to be willing to change your mind based on evidence.
that really feels like a solid blueprint. Avoid misery via inversion, build the lattice work, fight your biases, keep learning objectively. So wrapping up, what's the final sort of distilled life advice from all this wisdom?
It's quite down to earth, designed for coping with the inevitable bumps in the road. First, have low expectations.
Manage disappointment proactively.
Right. Second, have a sense of humor. Third, surround yourself with the love of friends and family. And fourth, maybe the most crucial, live with change and learn to adapt to it. You only get ahead if you stay committed to learning how to learn.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. We started with inversion, figuring out how to fail so you can avoid it. We built up the idea of a mental lattice work of models from different fields. We talked about applying these to business, fighting biases like inconsistency avoidance and incentive bias. The goal isn't genius, but just being.
A little bit wiser than the other guys, on average, for a long, long time. That accumulated edge is powerful.
It is, but it also comes with a certain responsibility, doesn't it, once you understand these psychological triggers?
It raises a serious moral question. Once you know how the human mind is wired, how motivation works, how easily people can be influenced, how should you use that knowledge?
There's a fantastic historical anecdote that illustrates this perfectly. It involves Captain Cook, right? And his battle with scurvy.
Yes, a classic problem.
Right.
Scurvy was decimating crews on long voyages. Cook strongly suspected, that sauerkraut was the key, maybe because Dutch ships using it seemed to have less scurvy.
But his English sailors.
Hated it. They were cranky, suspicious sailors. They called it kraut, associated with the foreigners they disliked, and just refused to eat this weird cabbage stuff. Forcing them wasn't really an option, and explaining vitamin C wasn't going to work back then.
So reasoning and force were out. What did he do?
He used elementary psychology. Brilliant, really.
Ow.
He made an announcement. Sauerkraut, he declared, was this incredibly valuable, special food. So special, in fact, that initially it would only be served to the officers at the captain's table.
Creating scarcity and leveraging social proof.
Exactly. The sailors see the officers eating it, seemingly valuing it highly. The natural human tendency, the social proof tendency kicks in. What high-status people value must be good, right? They start murmuring, wanting what they can't have.
So they started desiring it?
Pretty soon, yes. Then, after a suitable period, Cook magnanimously announced that due to popular demand, the men could now have sauerkraut served to them, maybe one day a week.
And they probably jumped at the chance. That simple trick, that psychological nudge.
Likely saved countless lives from scurvy on that voyage. It worked.
But it was deliberate manipulation, wasn't it? For a good end, clearly, but manipulation nonetheless.
It absolutely was. And that's the provocative thought we want to leave you with. Once you gain this worldly wisdom, once you understand these powerful psychological models, what are the ethical lines? How much should you use this knowledge to nudge, persuade, or even manipulate the behavior of others, even if you think it's for their own good? Where do you draw that line?